Far from Home, Portraits of Displacement, written by Gabriel Ndayishimiye. Chapter 5, The Refugee Informer. You've seen them, the ones who talk too much, the ones who get too comfortable with microphones and camera lenses. They start out angry, sure, like the rest of you. But somewhere along the way, the anger gets repackaged, softened up, made palatable for people who want stories but don't want to feel guilty about them. At first, he didn't think of himself as an informer. No one does. He just thought he was surviving, maybe even helping. Someone offered him a chance to speak, a journalist, an NGO, some well-meaning academic who needed a voice to fit their latest report. They called it a platform. He called it an opportunity to set the record straight. He didn't see it happening, not at first. The way they nudged him toward talking about his own trauma instead of the politics that caused it. The way they subtly shifted his words to make them less harsh, more resilient. They didn't say it outright, but he could feel it. The unspoken rule that if you wanted to be heard, you had to sound a certain way. Not too angry, not too political. Just sad enough to tug at their conscience, but not enough to make them feel responsible. And it worked. People listened. They nodded sympathetically, wrote down his words, called him brave. He was invited to more events, more panels, more stages with bright lights and serious faces. He got used to it, started learning how to read the room, when to lean into the sorrow, when to soften the anger, when to thank the very people who had funded the wars that turned his home into rubble. Did he know what he was becoming? Did he even see it? Or did it just happen, like a slow drip that wore him down until he was shaped into something useful, something marketable? One day, he was up on stage again, telling his story to a room full of diplomats. They were nodding, applauding, congratulating themselves for giving him this platform, and it hit him all at once. This wasn't about truth. It wasn't even about him. It was about giving themselves a story they could live with, a story that made them look generous and progressive without ever having to confront the damage they caused. And he knew right then that he wasn't speaking his own story anymore. He was just saying what they wanted to hear. He was the proof that they'd done the right thing, that they were the good guys for letting him talk. But did he stop? No? Maybe he told himself it was too late, or maybe he just couldn't face the idea that he'd sold out his own voice. Maybe he even convinced himself that he was still helping, still making a difference. Or maybe it's just easier not to think about it at all. And now, when he speaks, you wonder if he believes it, if he still thinks his words are his own, or if he's just too deep into the role to admit he doesn't recognize his own voice anymore. You've seen it happen before, the way they turn survivors into storytellers and storytellers into mascots. It starts small, with an invitation, a panel, a radio show, an interview in a newspaper that nobody reads. They frame it as giving you a voice. But there's a catch. They expect that voice to sound a certain way. You don't know it at first. You're just grateful someone's listening. So, you sit down, you tell your story, and you see the way they react. They lean in when you talk about loss. They nod when you talk about resilience. But the minute you bring up the reasons, the politics, the money, the foreign governments that arm the men who turned your home into a graveyard, they get uncomfortable. Eyes drop, hands fidget. Someone coughs. That's when you start to learn. It's not lying. You're not making things up. You're just making choices, deciding which parts to say out loud and which to swallow. You talk about the pain, but not the hands that inflicted it. You mention betrayal, but not the names behind it. You make your story smaller, softer, something they can live with. And it works. The invitations keep coming. You're asked to speak at think tanks, universities, donor conferences, where everyone congratulates themselves on being good people for listening. You're in the room now, and that means something. You tell yourself it's worth it. Better to be heard halfway than not at all. But visibility isn't free. You learn that quick enough. Each stage you step onto, each microphone you speak into, you're trading something. Legitimacy is currency, and you have to pay for it. Not with lies, but with omissions. You trim your story to fit the space they've given you. You don't talk about how the same governments that put you on stage helped fund the regime that drove you out. You don't talk about how exile wasn't just bad luck, but part of a plan, a strategy to clear out the troublemakers. You don't say that the wars they're so eager to condemn now were once investments they were proud to support. You know what happens if you get too honest. You've seen it before. The ones who break script, who name names, who point fingers at the sponsors themselves. They don't get invited back. They become difficult, too radical, ungrateful. They're erased, without a word. Just invitations that stop coming, platforms that dry up, phone calls that don't get returned. So you adjust. You get smart about it. You learn to play the game without giving away your hand. You emphasize your survival, not your anger. You frame your exile as a tragic mistake rather than an intentional act. You give them the human story they want, the one that makes them feel generous and wise for listening. Does it bother you? Sometimes. Late at night, when the applause is just an echo and the gratitude feels like a bad joke, you tell yourself it's worth it. That being inside the room, even if it means saying what they want to hear, is better than being shut out entirely. That a half-truth spoken loud is better than the whole truth buried and ignored. You say that to yourself over and over, like a prayer. Because to ask the real question, to ask whether you've turned your own story into a commodity, would be admitting that you betrayed something. Maybe not your people, maybe not your cause, but yourself. And that's a truth you don't want to face. Not now. Not yet. So you keep going. You keep shaping your words to fit their ears, telling yourself it's better this way, that you're still making a difference, that it's still your voice, even if you don't recognize it anymore. But every so often, you catch a glimpse of yourself reflected in a dark window or a polished floor, and you wonder whose voice you're really using and how long it'll be before you forget what your own sounded like. You know how it is. You've learned it the hard way. You don't get to be angry. Not here. Not after they've let you in, given you a bed, put a roof over your head. You don't get to spit at the hand that's feeding you, even if that hand is the same one that burned your house down in the first place. They expect gratitude, and not just the polite, practiced kind. They want it deep, sincere, something that shows on your face, that colors your voice when you talk about how you're just grateful to be safe, to be given a second chance. They like to hear you say that. It makes them feel good, makes them feel like they've done something decent in a world that keeps showing them how cruel it really is. But you're angry. Hell, you've been angry for so long that it's like a second heartbeat. You want to tell them that their charity isn't as noble as they think it is. You want to say that they didn't save you. They just couldn't stand the sight of your people washing up on their shores, couldn't ignore the corpses anymore. You want to say it wasn't compassion that made them open their borders. It was bad optics, a crisis that needed managing. But you can't. You know that. The second you let the anger slip, the second you drop the Grateful Refugee Act, you're done. They'll look at you like you've just shattered the illusion they've been building. The one where they're the heroes and you're the thankful survivor. Anger doesn't fit the script. Rage doesn't sit well with their narrative. They're not paying you to be angry. They're paying you to be tragic and resilient. So you bite it back. You tell the story the way they want to hear it. You say thank you with enough weight to sound sincere. You say you're lucky, that you're grateful, that you'll never forget how they open their doors. And they nod and smile and shake your hand, and you feel like you're signing away the last of your pride just to keep the room from turning cold. What does it cost you? Everything. It costs you your own damn voice. It costs you the right to say, you didn't do me a favor, you just cleaned up your own mess. It costs you the right to say that sanctuary wasn't about saving lives, but about saving face. It costs you your dignity, little by little. Every time you stand in front of them and paint your suffering in soft, manageable strokes. You want to shout. You want to tell them that they're not as generous as they think they are. That giving you a place to sleep doesn't absolve them of what they did or what they failed to stop. But you don't, because you've seen what happens to the angry ones. They don't get invited back. They don't get to stand on the stages and tell their stories. They get written off as ungrateful, as agitators, as men who don't know how to appreciate a second chance. So you smile. You let the gratitude weigh down your words. You thank them for saving you, for giving you a chance to rebuild. You keep your voice soft and your eyes lowered. You play the part they've written for you because the alternative is silence. And silence is a kind of death you can't afford right now. But it eats at you. It chews you up from the inside. Some nights you lie awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the things you should have said, all the truths you should have shouted, even if it meant losing your place at their table. You hate yourself for bending, for giving them what they want. You wonder if you've lost the right to be angry at all. And that's the worst of it, the betrayal. Not of them, of yourself. You look in the mirror and don't recognize the man looking back. You see a version of yourself that's been softened, smoothed out, made palatable. A man who's learned to smile through the anger because the world likes a resilient refugee, but it doesn't want a furious one. You know the game now. You know how to survive it. But every time you stand on that stage and tell your story their way, a little piece of you dies, and you're not sure how much more of yourself you can afford to lose. You don't say what you're not allowed to say. That's how it works. You get up there, take the stage, take the microphone, look out at the room full of people who are patting themselves on the back just for listening to you, and you say what they want to hear. You're the proof that they're good people. You're the reason they can sleep at night. You don't make them uncomfortable. You don't force them to confront the blood on their hands or the stench of hypocrisy clinging to their suits. You talk about suffering. Sure, they love suffering. They eat it up. The more tragic, the better. They'll nod along like saints, eyes wide with concern. But you don't talk about who caused it. You don't say, it was you. You don't tell them how they made your home a graveyard, how their money bought the bullets that tore your life apart. You don't point out that the same hands applauding you now are the ones that signed the deals that put your family in the ground. You don't mention how their democracy exported itself to your doorstep wrapped in napalm and left your city burning while they counted their profits. They don't want to hear that. They want to feel generous, heroic. They want to bask in your gratitude and tell themselves they made a difference. You know this, and you don't challenge it. You play the part. You say, thank you. You talk about loss and resilience and how lucky you are to be given a second chance. You make sure they feel like saviors. At first, you don't notice. You're just glad to be heard. You think it's enough that someone's listening, that your words are getting out there. You don't realize how they're shaping you, molding you into something palatable, something they can digest without choking on guilt. You think you're telling your story, but you're just giving them the version they're willing to pay for. And then one day, you get bold. Maybe it's fatigue or maybe it's pride, but you decide to tell the truth. You say the thing you've been holding back. You name names. You say the wars didn't start themselves and the tyrants didn't buy their own guns. You say the bombs didn't fall from nowhere. They fell from planes built here, financed here, blessed here. You see the room stiffen, feel the air go cold. They don't like that. They don't want to hear about their fingerprints on the knife in your back. The microphone cuts out. The invitations stop. You get replaced by someone who knows how to be grateful without asking for justice. Someone who can tell a story that makes them feel good about themselves. You realize too late that they never really wanted your story at all. They wanted their own story, dressed up in your suffering. You thought you were making them see. You thought you were changing something. But you were just there to prove that they're good people, that they're the heroes for giving you a platform. You thought it was your voice. It never was. It was theirs all along, shaped and polished and handed back to you with your own name stamped on it. So you learn to watch your words. You learn to keep the anger quiet and the gratitude loud. You learn to turn blame into abstraction. War is tragic, you say. Displacement is heartbreaking. You don't say who caused it. You don't mention the hands that made it happen. You pretend suffering is just a storm that blew through your life without warning. And when you get back to your cramped room at night, when the applause has faded and the gratitude feels like ashes in your mouth, you wonder how it happened. You wonder when you stopped telling your story and started telling theirs. You wonder if you ever really had a voice at all, or if you just became another tool in their machinery, a refugee made respectable by keeping his mouth shut. And you hate yourself for playing along. You hate how you smiled through the lies and let them make a hero out of your pain. You hate how you let them use you, how you let them take your anger and reshape it into something polite and pitiful. You wonder if you'll ever get that anger back, or if you gave it away so cheaply you'll never find it again. And you tell yourself you'll stop. You'll speak the truth, no matter the cost. You'll call out the lies, even if it means losing the stage. You'll do it next time. You swear. You'll be braver next time. But you know you won't. You know you'll keep saying what they want to hear. You'll keep performing because without their invitations, without their platforms, you'll be nothing but another angry refugee shouting into the wind. And you hate yourself for knowing it, and hate yourself even more for not doing anything about it. You know how it is when you're useful. They keep you around. They keep you talking. They make you feel like your story matters, like your pain's got some kind of value that can't be measured in numbers or data points. They like the way you sound when you say the right things. They like how you look when you're just grateful enough to make them feel generous, but not enough to make them feel guilty. You're useful, that's what it is. Not important, never important, just useful. As long as your story lines up with their narrative, as long as your tragedy fits their agenda, they'll keep putting you on stages and printing your name in their programs. They'll keep telling you how brave you are while they pick apart your words and stitch them back together into something less sharp, something they can live with. But you know better. You know they're just waiting for the moment you slip up, say the wrong thing, let too much anger seep through your smile. You know how it happens. How the invitations stop coming. How your emails go unanswered. How your name drops off the list of approved speakers without anyone bothering to tell you why. It's always like that. Polite rejection, quiet dismissal. They won't say you're too difficult. They'll just stop seeing you. You've watched it happen to others. Men and women who spoke too plainly, who forgot that gratitude is the price of survival. They stopped performing it just long enough to let their rage show. And that was it. No more panels, no more microphones, no more polite nods from people who don't really listen. You knew them. Once, they were the voices everyone wanted to hear, and then they were ghosts, wandering the same cafes where they used to be heroes. You're not stupid. You see the pattern. You see how they replace you without a word. There's always someone younger, hungrier, more eager to play the part without questioning the script. Someone who hasn't learned yet that usefulness is temporary, that the world likes its exiles tragic but never angry. You wonder who it'll be, whose face will take your place on the poster, whose words will echo in rooms you're no longer welcome in. You know it's coming. You're not special. You're not permanent. You're just another face, another story, another reminder that refugees can be noble as long as they're tame. You know you're replaceable. They'll find another who knows how to bow just low enough without breaking. Sometimes you wonder if they already have. Maybe you're already being pushed out, slowly, quietly, until you fade into nothing but a memory of a voice that used to matter. And what then? What do you do when your usefulness is gone, when no one's paying attention, when the platforms go silent and the stages belong to someone else? Do you go back to being angry? Do you throw caution to the wind and finally say what you've been holding back for years? Do you dare to speak the truth and damn the consequences? Or do you just disappear like the rest, bitter and used up, whispering the truth into your coffee because no one wants to hear it anymore? And then there's the other thing, the thing you don't like to think about, the thing that gnaws at you when you're lying awake at night, that quiet fear that maybe, just maybe, you've already been replaced, not by someone else, but by the version of you they wanted all along, the grateful one, the obedient one, the one who learned how to shape his rage into something palatable, something that doesn't sting too much. You've worn the mask so long, you're not sure where it ends, and you begin. You've been so careful, so measured, always saying just enough without crossing the line, always telling just enough of the truth without pointing fingers at the hands that made your life a hell. You've been performing gratitude so long, you're not even sure it's a performance anymore. Sometimes you catch yourself in the mirror and wonder who you are now. You wonder if the people you left behind would recognize you. You wonder if they'd see you as a hero or just another sellout who learned how to talk without saying anything at all. You wonder if they'd understand why you did it, why you softened the truth, why you smiled when you wanted to scream. And maybe they wouldn't. Maybe they'd hate you for it. Maybe they'd see through the polished speeches and the forced smiles and know you betrayed yourself just to survive. Maybe they'd never take you back, not after they see how far you've bent to fit the mold they made for you. And you hate yourself for it. You hate how you've let them shape you, how you've let them use your voice to absolve themselves. You hate how you've become the thing you swore you wouldn't be, a mouthpiece, a puppet, a man who forgot how to speak without worrying about who's listening. But it's too late now, isn't it? You're in too deep, and you can't afford to lose what little you have left. You've built your survival on this tightrope walk, balancing between truth and silence, between anger and gratitude. You know that if you fall, they won't catch you. They'll just step over your broken words and move on to the next tragic hero who knows how to play the part without making them uncomfortable. And the worst part, you don't even know if you can break free. You don't know if you're capable of burning it all down, of stepping up to that podium one last time and saying, no more lies, no more gratitude, no more playing along. You don't know if you can stomach the way they'll look at you, disappointed, betrayed, ready to forget you ever existed. Because maybe it's not just fear holding you back. Maybe it's comfort. Maybe you've gotten used to the role they gave you. Maybe you've learned to like the way it feels to be needed, to be visible, to be listened to, even if it's on their terms. Maybe you're too tired to fight anymore, too worn out from years of careful speech and half-truths. Or maybe, just maybe, you're still waiting for the right moment, waiting for that last invitation, that final stage where you'll rip off the mask and tell them everything. Name names, point fingers, burn every bridge, and watch the whole charade crumble into dust. Maybe, or maybe that moment will never come. Maybe you'll go on performing until they're done with you, and then you'll fade away, just like the rest. And when that happens, when the lights are off and the applause is just an echo, you'll sit alone in some dusty room, wondering if any of it was worth it. wondering if you were ever more than just a voice they used and then forgot. Wondering if you'll ever find your real voice again, or if you lost it the moment you learned how to be useful. You know it's too late now, don't you? You've worn the mask so long that it's fused to your skin. You've shaped yourself to fit their story until your own truth became unrecognizable. You tell yourself you're still helping, still making a difference, but deep down, you know the truth. Your voice is gone, and they never really wanted it to begin with. Maybe you'll keep playing the role they've written for you. Too tired to fight back. Too comfortable in the limelight to risk obscurity. Or maybe, just maybe, you'll find the courage to break the script, to let the anger flood back in and refuse to be useful anymore. But chances are you won't. Chances are you'll keep telling yourself it's worth it, that half a truth is better than none at all. And one day, when the applause has faded and the platform has moved on to someone else, you'll sit alone with the weight of your silence and wonder whether you ever really spoke at all. And that's the final betrayal, the one you can't escape. You sold your story, sold your anger, sold your soul, and you don't even know if you can get it back.